Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today is a beautiful fall day. I mean, it is early fall and the temperatures are just perfect. You know, low 50s at night, low 70s during the day. This is cherry right now. So fall, I say this about, you know, probably spring and summer too, but I think fall is my favorite season. So just take that for what it's worth. I'm probably going to say the same thing about spring and also summer. I just love those transition times of the year where there's a lot of big migrations happening with the bait fish and also the bass. And so things are starting to liven up. And fall is just one of those time periods. And really fall is all about a couple things. Grass fishing on the TVA and also shad migrations back into the creek. So there's a lot of movement, but there's also a lot of really nice, awesome cover, such as those grass mats that have been, growing all summer long, and now they're at their thickest, and they're starting to thin out underneath. So the top is still matted out, but the root systems are starting to break up, and the bass are using, that cover pretty regularly. So I want to show you guys 3 different techniques or baits that I highly suggest for fall fishing, and this is more geared towards the TVA river system lake. So, Lake Chickamauga, obviously, Watts Bar, Guntersville, Pickwick, Wheeler, any of these lakes on the TVA. Most of them have a lot of that grass, so a lot of hydrilla or even milfoil on some of these lakes. So those are matted out, and then you also have a ton of biomass as far as the shad populations, both gizzard and threadfin shad, and both of those species of shad are moving around quite a bit. So anyways, so let's dive into the 3 different baits. The first one has to be a frog. Hollow body frog like this one right here. Let's see, there we go. This is the Leapfrogs from Z-Man, and I'm showing you the exact juice color that I'm going to be using this time of year. Black. That's the only color you need when it comes to the TVA and mat fishing. Now, if you're fishing more open water where the fish can really, investigate and check out that bait, you might want to change up colors a little bit. But when it comes to grass mat fishing, throwing a frog over those heavy mats, I want something that just has a really, big silhouette, and black is the best. And this is just my go-to color for fishing these grass mats when they're really thick. So I use the 2 3/4 inch version. Okay, I want a bigger frog for these mats. I want this bait to create an indentation in the mat. And if you're fishing some really thick grass mats, I might even put in some little BBs in this bait. Slip some BBs in there, create a little bit more weight, puts a little bit more pressure on those mats, and creates a kind of a trench as you bring it along the surface. So I might customize one of these frogs in a way that it becomes unfishable for like open water situations because it'll sink like a rock. But for grass mats, it works really good, because what you're trying to do is just be able to allow that fish to track that bait as it skitters across that really dense grass mat. So I might go ahead and chop off the legs too, the skirt legs there. I might chop them down to like a 1/2 inch or something like that. I don't want any short strikes. I want the fish to focus on the body. So a hollow body frog, black color, and customized to the exact grass mat that you're fishing. Really hard to beat. The one thing I will mention about grass fishing or frog fishing in the fall is that, again, these grass mats are really thick, so you're gonna have to use heavy tackle. 65-pound braid is pretty standard. A lot of times I'm fishing 50-pound braid with frog in open water and sparse vegetation, but 65-pound braid is standard for fishing, grass mats in the fall. So, rig up with heavy gear as far as that goes. I use the new Seaguar Tactics. I love that braid. It's got a 4-carrier braid, and it's really a tight weave. I can make really long casts with it, so that's the line that I like. I always use the Fitzgerald Okeechobee rod which is a rod that's 7/6, kind of a flip and stick design, but it is really specifically designed for heavy vegetation fishing. So that's the rod that I like to use for this, and then I just use a moderate speed gear ratio reel, either 7.2 to 1, or sometimes I'll go to 8.1 to 1, but I don't really like the higher gear ratios because then you lose a little bit of torque, and you need a lot of power to be able to pull these fish out of these grass mats. But I don't like low speed gear ratios either. So that middle one, 7.2 to 1, is money. All right, frog fishing had to be number one. All right, so number two is this is a technique that in a category of lure that is really, really effective this time of year. Again, we've got a lot of shad movement and a lot of big shad movement. So a lot of the shad that you're going to see are going to be gizzard shad, and they're going to be pretty large. And one of the baits that really starts to turn on this time of year is the walking bait. So the walking baits like the Spook, or one of those baits that has that concave mouth that creates a lot of spitting action, like a pencil popper or one of those shower blows from Evergreen. Those are all going to work really, really well. And you're just fishing grass lines, you're fishing shallow bars on these lakes. You're fishing a lot of different areas, but the key is finding those areas where those big shad are very, very active. And a walking topwater is really, really effective for those situations. So the tackle that I'm going to be using probably 40 or 50 pound test braid, again that Tactics braid, because as my main line, and then I'm going to tie a probably about a foot long monofilament 20 pound leader to this, 15 or 20 pound, and that just kind of keeps the braided line out of the hooks here. And I'm definitely going to be trading out the stock hooks for some Hayabusa treble hooks. That's really important, getting some sharp hooks on there. And then also I'm going to be using probably a 7.3 or 7.6 medium heavy Versus Series rod. Those Versus Series tend to have a little softer action to them for making longer casts and working this bait. And then I'm going to be using a high speed gear ratio. So 8.1 to 1, something like that. It's going to work perfect for this. So just cover water, walk this bait around, and it's going to get smashed. Oh, and by the way, since we're talking about color a little bit in this video, bone is really hard to beat. Just try to match the gizzard shad that you're seeing to this. But white, bone, anything in that realm is kind of the key this time of year. All right. So the final bait that we're going to talk about is a bait that I've talked a ton about in the past. This is one of my favorite fall baits for Lake Chickamauga specifically, but all around the country. One thing that's happening, we've talked about the shad migration, but the walking bait is primarily for fish that are feeding on those migrating gizzard shad, but the threadfin shad that you start seeing in the fall on the backs of the creeks, or moving to the backs of the creeks, are very, very small generally, and you want a bait that is kind of a little bit more finesse. And this right here is the Minnows from Z-Man. This is a bait that I've used a lot. So we've got the Minnows and we've got the Finesse Eyes jig head. This is the exact setup that I'm going to be using. I use a 1/4 ounce Finesse Eyes jig head, and then I use the Minnows in the pearl blue glimmer. That is the color that I love to throw this time of year. Just seems to fit perfect with the water quality, watercolor that you see on the TVA, especially Lake Chickamauga. But this is just a bait that you're going to be using on spinning gear. You're going to be just casting out in the backs of these creeks, fan casting, and this is a bait that just absolutely catches them because it is matching the hatch. It's matching those small little threadfin shad that are moving in the backs of the creeks. You could throw all kinds of baits that are maybe an inch or more bigger than the shad back there, and you'll never get touched. But as soon as you start throwing a bait that is the same size as that shad, which the Minnows does a really good job of imitating, that's when you start getting bit. So this bait is really good. And sometimes I'll even trim off, you know, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch or something like that if the bait fish are really, really small. So overall, this little swim bait package catches a ton of fish and big fish too. If those fish are feeding in the backs of those creeks on the small thread fin, that's the type of bait you want to throw. You don't want to throw anything bigger than that. But those are the 3 baits that I highly suggest that you guys give a shot this fall in October. These are all definitely going to work at some point in time. I would say that both the swim bait and the walking baits a little bit further on in October when things really start to change. But the frog is going to be solid throughout October into early November on most of these lakes. But anyways, guys, thank you very much for watching this video. Make sure that you comment below if you have any questions or just comments in general. And thank you guys for watching. I'm going to see you out on the water.